Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the Flight Sim world. This is Viper Strike 95, and welcome back, everyone. Happy Friday to you guys. And I hope you all have a great week. And yes, guys, it is the weekend. Happy Friday, you guys. So, so we're here with another 50 states and 50 streams, and today, and we are in part 19. And yes, guys, it's the 19th State of the Union, Indiana, my home state. So, yes, Indiana. We're actually here in Evansville, believe it or not. We're all the way in the southwest corner of the state. We're in Evansville, Indiana. And we're going to be flying across much of the state here today. We're going to cross from one end of the state to the other. And, and if you guys aren't aware about Indiana, it is known as the Hoosier State. Yes, Hoosier is actually a thing. And this unique Midwest state is also known as the Crossroads of America, which makes sense considering, well, Indiana, its highways are crossroads between the eastern half of the country and the western half of the country, especially with horse and wagon, and then later roads. So that's why Indiana got its nickname. So before we get started, I want to say hello to all the chat. Super Typhon, good to see you. Happy birthday, my dude. Happy 26th birthday, my dude. Um, Great to see you here. In a Bonias player, great to have you here too, my friend. Thank you for coming here. Yes, I'm very excited to do some flying in my home state here today. So good to see you, my dude. Here's a shout out for a Bonias player, 200. Here's a shout out for him. So our flight plan this afternoon, will be our flight plan here. So we'll start here at Evansville, Indiana, at Evansville Regional. From here, we'll fly to downtown Evansville, fly around downtown Evansville. We'll check that out here. Then from downtown Evansville, we're going to head up straight north, and we'll make our way over to the historic city of Vincennes, Indiana. This historic city is most well known for being the first major settlement in the state on the banks of the Wabash River. We're heading northeast to our first stop here at Monroe County Airport, just outside of the famous college town of Bloomington, Indiana. A very well beloved college town here in the state. Indiana's IU Bloomington. Then from there, we visit IU Bloomington. Then we head up north and visit the state capital and largest city in the state of Indiana, Indianapolis. We'll fly over the world famous Motor Speedway, as well as check out downtown, including Lucas Oil Stadium and Gainbridge Fieldhouse, the Soldier and Sailors Monument, State House. Of course, you have the entire American Legion Hall. And then we make our way northeast to our second stop here in Muncie, very well-known college town, home of Ball State. In Muncie, we'll land at Muncie Regional Airport, or Muncie Airport, or Delaware County Regional, our second stop. Our third stop will be the longest leg in the journey. We'll fly into Fort Wayne, Indiana, Indiana's second largest city in Fort Wayne. Check out here. Then we'll go northwest and we make our way through to Elkhart, the RV capital, before going up and visit South Bend, Indiana, the world famous home of Notre Dame University, the Fighting Irish. We'll make our final stop here at South Bend International. So yeah, we're going to go from one end of the state to the other state part. So that is where we're going to be doing today. The plane we'll take today is a bit of an interesting plane, and it's kind of a freak of a nature. Yes, it's the Draco X. Goffrin's developed this thing. This thing is a freak of nature, and basically, this was the brainchild of none other than Mike Patey. This is actually the brainchild of Mike Patey himself. You probably have seen some of his videos and such. But basically, the Draco is what you take when you bring a Polish Vilga, You take the PLZ-14 Vilga, and you know what? And you slap on a PT6A turboprop engine that can generate 680 horsepower into a small plane like this. You're gonna have some absolutely stupid performance with this thing. It can cruise up to 180 miles an hour. It takes jet fuel. It has a range of 1,000 miles, and it can take off and land just under 100 feet. Yes, it's as stupid as you think this. It is as stupid as you think this. In terms of performance, it is as stupid as you guys think it is. It really is. It's a ridiculous piece of machine. Oh yeah, and she can also fly up to 20,000 feet. As if you don't, if this thing isn't impressive enough, it can go to 20,000 feet. Yes, she's an absolutely insane bush machine. Um, there's nothing that this plane can't. Let's go ahead and get this turboprop going. So we're actually here in Evansville, Indiana. Just a brief talking about Evansville for a bit. We're actually at Evansville Regional Airport, just outside of Evansville, Indiana. This airport here is the main airport serving Evansville. It was built in 1928. It's the fourth largest airport in the state. After Indianapolis, South Bend, and Fort Wayne are the three big airports bigger than Evansville. But the big part about this airport, most notably, was that it was used for a lot of jet flying and such. The first jet that landed here was carrying presidential candidate Barry Goldwater. And it's mainly used to flights to Florida, but also to several hub airports like Charlotte, Chicago, and Dallas. Is what mainly flies in and out of this airport. So that's definitely something about Evansville Airport. However, one of the most notorious incidents that happened at this airport, by the way, was actually on December 13th, 1977, when a Douglas C-53 actually operated Indiana Air Flight 216 crashed on takeoff from Evansville on a non-scheduled flight to Nashville Airport. And all 29 members died. And this is notoriously bad because it turned out it was the entire University of Evansville basketball team that died. It was due to the lack of removal of the gust lock and the improperly loaded aircraft. And that was a major tragedy for the University of Evansville basketball. All of them died. So yes, that is pretty tragic. And Evansville, Indiana, our first stop here, our first destination, is Indiana's third most populous city after Indianapolis and Fort Wayne, and it's the most populous city in southern Indiana. So, very important stuff here. It was situated in Oxbow of the Ohio River. It was named the Beautiful River, and this city was founded in 1812, the same year as the War of 1812, and it anchors a very notable economic hub based on trade, transportation, and utilities. All major parts of Evansville's. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, I had to turn on the I had to turn on the headphones because yes, this plane gets very, very. So the pre-flight inspection's done. Now we're gonna get ready to start the engine here. Evansville is also home to the state's first casino, Bally's Evansville. It's also home to the state's oldest and largest zoos, Mesker Park. And sports tourism is a big deal with the University of Evansville as well as University of Southern Indiana. One of the more unique things about for sports is it's home to a very historic ballpark, Boss Field, which was built in 1915 as the third oldest ballpark still in regular use, only surpassed by Fenway Park and Wrigley Field. Evansville it's also uniquely involved in World War II. It was a major place for industrial production, especially for LSTs were built here at the Evansville Shipyard. In fact, it was the nation's largest inland producer of LSTs. It was also a Plymouth factory turned into lots of bullets. And also, there was also an aircraft factory for the Republic aircraft, which produced the P-47 Thunderbolt. In fact, almost half of all P-47s were made in Evansville, Indiana during the Second World War. Their prop, and we're going to build. And that is basically everything. So yeah, that is Evansville, Indiana for you guys. Let's go ahead and take her off. And yes, holy hell. I'm going to turn down the plane sound because, yes, as you can tell, this plane is absolutely stupid. We're going to taxi to the end of the runway here at Evansville Regional. Also around the grounds of Evansville Regional Airport is the Evansville Wartime Museum, which features Evansville's role in the Allied war effort during World War II and other conflicts. And there's even an Evansville-built P-47 Thunderbolt, the Hoosier Spirit II. And there's also an LST you can visit, the LST-325. And in fact, it is still the last navigable tank landing ship in operation. It's still the last one operating here in Evansville. Yeah, pretty cool stuff here, Evansville, Indiana. Really neat city. Definitely check out and visit. I visited Evansville once. I would like to visit there again. It's a bit of a drive, but I would like to visit Evansville. It'd be a cool place. Like I said, there's still a lot of places in the Hoosier State I still haven't visited yet, so would be interested in checking that out. We're not going to need super high altitude for this lake. Indiana is kind of a flat state. It's not as flat as other states, but it is a bit flat. Don't really need super high altitude for. Okay, guys, you want to see how short I can get this thing taken off? Let's see how short I can really get this. Max power. Yeah, 30 knots and yeah, this thing's already off. Jesus. Yeah, Jesus, this freaking rocket. Yeah, this Rocco is absolute. I love it for that reason. We're pushing through 150 miles an hour, and yeah, I got built. Here we are, guys. Downtown Evansville, Indiana. Once we get to Evansville, we'll turn left. We'll go take a U-turn and Vincent. Here it is, downtown Evansville, Indiana. Yes. You guys are aware this is my home state. But here's the funny thing. I live closer to Louisville, Kentucky, the largest city in Kentucky, than I do live in Indianapolis. If you guys are so keen to want to know. Here are guys. Now feet, and we're heading our way to Vince. Let's go ahead and talk about Indiana as we head our way to Vincennes. Indiana, located in the Midwest United States, it borders by Lake Michigan to the northwest, Michigan to the north and northeast, Ohio to the east, the Ohio River, Kentucky to the south and southeast, the Wabash River in Illinois to the west. Of course, it's nicknamed the Hoosier State. It's the 38th largest state by land area and the 17th most populous of the 50 states. Its capital largest city is Indianapolis. It admitted to the 19th state in December 11th, 1816. Of course, Indiana has a very diverse economy. Has a diverse economy with a GDP of $352 billion. It has several metropolitan areas with greater than 100,000 people, and lots of smaller cities and towns. It's home to several professional teams, all located in Indianapolis, as well as several notable competitive events, mainly the Indianapolis 500, which is held at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Definitely pretty cool stuff about the Hoosier State. People. So, in terms of Indiana's history, we need to go back to the pre-colonial time. So, the first inhabitants that came here to the Hoosier State were Paleo-Indians who arrived here at 8000 BC after the melting of the glaciers of the Ice Age. By in small groups, they were nomads and hunted large game like mastodons. Then you have the Archaic period between 5000 to 4000 BC, took the next phase of indigenous culture, and they developed new tools and techniques to help grow into civilization. Then afterwards, during the latter period, they built over mounds and middens, and it ended around 1500 BC, though some lived up to 700 BC. Then you have the Woodland period, which built a lot of new attitudes with ceramics and potteries, as well as cultivation of plants. One of those being the Indian people had an elegant burial ritual. Then in the middle, you have the Hopewell people, who developed long-range trading goods. At the end, they developed highly productive cultivation. And it ended around 1000 AD. And of course, then you have the Mississippian culture, which lasted into the 15th century with the arrival of Europeans. People created large urban settlements and cosmology. One such you can find is Angel Mounds here in the state. Just 8 miles southeast of Evansville is the Angel Mounds. The historic Native American tribes spoke different languages of the Algonquin family, which include the Shawnee, Miami, and Illinois people, as well as refugee tribes from other regions, including the Delaware tribe, joined them as well. Of course, European history would start back in 1679 when French explorer René. Oh, what's this? Hey, Catherine 410, thank you for the follow. We're doing our 50 states and 50 streams where we're flying in the state of Indiana currently. We're mainly talking about the history of the Hoosier states. Indiana, this, by the way, it is my home state, actually. And Rene Robert Cavalier Sieur de LaSalle becomes the first European to cross into Indiana after reaching South Bend at the St. Joseph River. And then he returned the following year to learn more about the region, and soon French-Canadian fur traders arrived, bringing blankets, jewelry, tools, whiskeys, and weapons to trade for valuable skins, which are a huge deal back in Europe. They were extremely valuable. By 1702, Sieur Jochereau, he established his first trading post located in historic Vincennes. And later, Sieur de Vincennes actually built Fort Miami, which is now in Fort Wayne. And then another fort on the banks of the Wabash, told Native American trade routes. Of course, then 1732, Sieur de Vincennes built a second fur trading post in Vincennes and later turned it into a major settlement. Of course, Indiana was involved in the 7 Years' War, as the native tribes sided with the French. Ultimately, the British were victorious, and the French were forced to cede the British kind of all the lands in North America east of the Mississippi, and north and west of the colony. Of course, that being said, the tribes of India did not give up, as they captured several of the forts in the area. And of course, the area designated west of Appalachians was used for the Native Americans, known as the Indian Territory. Of course, in 1775, the American Revolutionary War happened as colonists sought self-governance and independence from Britain, and while the majority of fighting did take place in the East Coast, one such patriot military officer, George Rogers Clark, called an army to fight the West, and Clark's army won significant battles and took over Vincennes and Fort Sackville in 1779. And during the war, he managed to cut off British troops, and his success was often credited for changing the course of the American Revolutionary War. At the end, through the Treaty of Paris, the British conceded their claims to the land south of the Great Lakes, formed the new United States. In 1787, the U.S. defined the Northwest Territory, which included modern-day Indiana, and in 1800, Congress separated Ohio from the Northwest Territory, granting the rest, known as the Indiana Territory. Jefferson chose William Henry Harrison as governor, which, fun enough, he was also the shortest presidency in U.S. history. And the capital of this territory was Vincennes. Then after Michigan was separated, Indiana was reduced to its current size and geography. There was also a lot of battles that happened between the U.S. settlers and the native tribes also occurred, with the Battle of Fallen Timbers and the Treaty of Greenville. North Native American titles to Indiana lands were extinguished, with reception, purchase, or war treaty, and about half the state was acquired by the treaty's hearings in 18. And the last of the lands were claimed in 1826 with the Treaty of Miscellaneous. Of course, Indiana became its first capital in Corydon, actually, which a town in the southern part of Indiana was named the second capital of the Indiana Territory after moving it from Vincennes in order to decrease the rate of Native American raids. Of course, 2 years later, Indiana became a U.S. state on December 11, 1816. And Corydon became the first capital of the state of Indiana, and that lasted until 1825 when it was moved present-day capital of Indianapolis. Yes, I've been to Corydon myself. I used to not live far from Corydon, Indiana, so I've been there myself. Following statehood, the new government worked to transform Indiana from a frontier state to a developed, well-populated, thriving state. A lot of immigrants made their way, which were Germans, but also Irish and English immigrants settled here in the state. In 1836, they had the Indiana Mammoth Internal Improvement Act, which led to a lot of roads, canals, railroads, and state public schools. Those plans bankrupted the state in financial disaster, but increased land and produced value more than fourfold. And of course, Indiana was also involved in the U.S. Civil War, as Indiana became politically influential and played an important role in the nation, as it was the first Western state to mobilize for the U.S. in the war. Soldiers from Indiana participated in all the war's major engagements, as it provided over 126 infantry regiments in the war. In fact, so many Hoosiers volunteered in the first call that thousands had to be turned away from the war. And Indiana contributed to over 208,000 men in the war. And casualties were over 35% of the men lost. The Civil War only was fought once in Indiana in the Newburgh Raid, as the only wars were the Newburgh Raid, which captured Newburgh, Indiana, making it the first northern town to be captured, and then, of course, the only major engagement was the Battle of Portland, which occurred during Morgan's raid, which left 15 dead, 40 wounded, and 355 captured. After the Civil War, Indiana remained largely agricultural, with post-war industries like mining, especially limestone, meatpacking, processing, and the building of wagons, buggies, and more became Indiana's main economy. Of course, natural gas was discovered in 1880, which led to an economic boom a bit, and attracted a lot of industries, particularly those of South Bend, Indianapolis, and Fort Wayne. The 20th century saw Indiana developing into a leading manufacturing state, with heavy industry in the north, particularly in Gary. Now, I know a lot of you guys know Gary for being pretty poor, and you would not be wrong about that at all. However, at one point, a lot of people don't know, is that at one point, Gary was one of the most industrially prosperous cities in the country, especially with the U.S. Steel Corporation back in the day. Also, Indiana was also where E.G. Debs was involved for Socialist Party. Hey, good to see you, Larry Gottnick. Good to see you. Yeah, they had some of their mountains near Nashville. Ah, that's right. I think you mentioned them. Of course, Indiana was also notorious in the 20th century for something, for a much darker reason. You see, the Ku Klux Klan was actually a big issue back in the 20s. Yes, the Ku Klux Klan that was organized in 1915. It appealed to a lot of Protestants about the trends, and as a result, it grew to be a very prominent part of Indian society. In fact, by 1925, 250,000 members of 250,000 Hoosiers were part of the Indiana Klan, which is about 30%. Yeah, it was bad. Very, very bad. By 1925, in fact, by 1925, over half the elected members were part of this evil organization. However, that year, the big change was actually, but that changed in the 30s with Democrats top of the polls, and Indiana was affected by the Great Depression. The Dust Bowl caused many people to flee from the West. So, yeah. As well, Indiana was very much affected by the Depression, and a lot of people did end up moving. Of course, World War II kind of helped the U.S. economy as it required a lot of steel and industry, and roughly 10% of Indiana's population joined armed forces, with hundreds of industries doing war material. And Indiana manufactured 4.5% of all U.S. military armaments, making it eighth among all the 48 states. Of course, after World War II, Republican supremacy returned to the state with economic recovery. And of course, with all that, industry became primary employer, and it trended to the 1960s. Urbanization helped many grow up to cities, especially with auto, steel, and pharmaceutical industry. However, However, the auto still became major industries. There was also the Civil Rights Bill in 19. Indiana schools were desegregated in the 49s, and Governor Walsh worked with them to pass the Indiana Civil Bill of Rights. And they continued more with amendments in the 1970s were proposed. Well, of course, the oil prices still hurt the automobile industries, as well as many companies across the state, the industrial, continued until the 80s. Well, that concludes basically Indiana's history, guys. So that is the history of the Hoosier State for you. Yes, Indiana does have a long history. So, I wanted to ask you guys some bits of the question. Now, I know some of you guys are thinking about yourselves. How did Indiana be called the Hoosier State? Because it's very unique. Because a Hoosier is the official denominator of the people of Indiana. And there's a lot of origins that debate. However, it was introduced by the 1840s. It was popularized by the Richmond resident John Finley's poem, The Hoosier's Nest. And some people, there's some origins to it. Some people say Hoosier is an etymology word, mainly with the high and hill, from the Old English word who, which comes back to the Cumbrian word Hoosier, which means anything unusually large, or the Old English word high and hill. So that could be one. Others say that Hoosier came from yokel slang of the yokel and stuff. Other used for like folk wars have a long history. But either way, Hoosier is the term for Indiana resident. So we're getting our way to flying to our first landmark for today, and that is our next waypoint. And that's historic Vincennes, Indiana will be our next waypoint. This is Vincennes. You guys have never heard of Vincennes? Located in Knox County, Indiana, home of the Wabash River. It was founded in 1732 by French fur traders. And it is the oldest continuously inhabited European settlement in the state, as well as the longest-serving territorial capital, and one of the oldest settlements west of the Appalachian. Population 16,000 people. It was previously inhabited by indigenous cultures, but the Europeans who grew it were mainly the French, who used it as a fur trading post. Of course, it was also by the British until they lost it in the American Revolutionary War and went through multiple different territories. One of the unique things about Vincennes, of course, was that it was involved in the American Revolutionary Battle, Siege of Fort Vincennes, and it was one of the turning points of the war thanks to Rogers Clark. Of course, one of the funny things about Vincennes is it had a time zone controversy in 2007 because the time of Indiana, because of the different time zone, from East time zone to Central. Of course, one of the more interesting things about Vincennes is, of course, there's lots of points of interest in the state. Of course, it's home to one of the few national historic parks in the state, the George Rogers Clark, a memorial park for the war hero. There's also Grassland, which was the famed mansion home of William Henry Harrison, the 9th president. As well as Fort Knox II, second Fort Knox, except the one in Kentucky. As well as the Red Skelton Museum of American Comedy, which was named after Vincennes' citizen Richard Skelton. Pretty interesting stuff here. Historic City Vincennes. Really would like to visit here. You also have a military museum here in the state, too. Here's Vincennes. We're going to go ahead and turn. Turn right. We're going to head to Bloomington. It'll be another 51 nautical miles to Bloomington, Indiana. Yeah, that's why I took the Draco today. I thought that would be a nice little plane for today. This is a historic Vincent. Yeah, Indiana's got some really cool stuff here too in the States. There's also Indiana Military Museum as well, a whole military facility, which has got lots of stuff about Indiana's military history. Got all sorts of unique collection, including aircraft and armor and stuff. Pretty cool stuff. And of course, you have the historic. Of course, you have also the historic national park. We're gonna continue on this way. So I hope you guys are having a good week so far. I hope you guys have some really cool plans this weekend. I got some documents to finish up for it as well. So once I get done with the documents, I'm just mainly going to be doing some more research work. Continue working more on some other documents. So by the time the 50 states, 50 streams end, I can work on getting some stuff done. So that's my plans for this week. I know Mer's going to be back on for a West Coast stream in the Coronado Seminole. Be doing some flying around the West Coast of California. He'll be doing that today. Then Allison's gonna be back tomorrow. Another one of her historical flight recreations. He'll be going from Kuwait to Dubai. So that'll be one of her streams. And of course, on Sunday we'll be in Mississippi. We'll finish part 2 of our series. That's what's going on this week of streams. So yeah, March Madness has already happened. March Madness has already happened. The NCAA tournament's already happened. Louisville got an 8 seed, and Louisville basketball's already out of the tournament. Come on, it's been one day and they're already out. God believe it, darn it. Hey, that further guy's now falling, and a rate of holy 95 people. What? Hold on, my dude. Welcome on in, Raiders. Holy heck. Good to see you. I was not expecting that in a million years. Hello, everyone. Good to see you guys. Live chat. Simulator Datebot, Fat Friendly Guy, MPBO, Payroll Chaos. Good to see you guys. Welcome on in. Hey, good to see ya. So, if you guys don't know about me, I am ViperStrike95. I've been streaming here on Twitch since 2021. I've done multiple flight sim series in the past. I've done an around the world trip with the DC-3, several historical flights, and even did sports related stuff. But today we're here with our 50 states and 50 streams. If you guys aren't aware about this, the 50 states in 50 series is all about the 50 U.S. states with general aviation as we visit and learn all about the 50 U.S. states in the country. We're here in the Draco today, and by the way, guys, Indiana is my home state. Proud born and raised Hoosier. So we're going from Evansville to South Bend. We'll be heading currently for our first stop here in Bloomington, Indiana. Thank you guys so much for coming, guys. Really appreciate all the new people in chat. Welcome on in. I mean, I was not expecting nice new people to don't know. So, really done a lot of stuff here. So, Earlier I talked about Indiana's history, of course. Indiana has been around for, for a long time, since 1816. It is the 19th. So really cool stuff. So I also worked on a lot of PowerPoint stuff, which talks about my topic, because I'm a researcher at heart. I love researching. I love learning about the world, and I've been doing this sort of stuff since 2021 as well. I did baseball. I did it for each of the places. Like I said, I love learning about every place. So this is Bloomington. We're going to be visiting Indiana's geography here. So yes, Indiana kind of looks flat. It's about the 38th largest state. It is kind of flat. Not the flattest state. There are flatter ones than Indiana. Looking at you, Florida. But Indiana is bordered by Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, was by the latitudinal line of Lake Michigan. Northern Indiana is physically very flat, turbulent terrain, which range from 600 to 1,000. Central Indiana is low, gently rolling hills. And southern Indiana is the most varied, with hills and geographic variation. I live around the southern half, which can be quite windy. Hey, Catmando, good to see you. Exosis, good to see you. Ohio's a great state, and actually, by the way, I actually have visited Ohio on the series just this past week. Last week, I visited Ohio. I actually have the VOD here in the channel, all the 50 states here. Yes, I actually visited Ohio last Friday. We went from Cincinnati up to Dayton, Columbus, Mansfield, Canton, and Cleveland. That was a lot of fun. Ohio was definitely a very cool state to visit. Ohio's a great state. I would love to visit more of it. I got to visit Cincinnati a few times. Got to check out the baseball game with the Reds, of course. Went for a concert there. And I've also visited Dayton, which I highly recommend, the National Air Force Museum. Amazing. That's worth visiting, and that's worth your money. 100%. Ohio's a great state. Check out. I want to visit more of it. Especially want to go check out Columbus. I'm really curious to see how that goes. So Ohio's a great state. Hey, Dougal Batavish, good to see you. Dougal, hello. Oh yeah, the Air Force Museum. I still haven't checked it out. It's been 12 years since I last visited the museum. I know they added some new stuff since then, mainly the Memphis Belle. I want to check that out. Yes. We're heading to Bloomington. And Indiana's also got a pretty relatively continental climate. Humid continental with cold winters, hot wet summers. Only the extreme southern portion is humid subtropical, which gets a lot more precipitation. But now, according to more updates, half the state is humid subtropical. The other is humid continental. In the midsummer, there's less variation with temperatures. However, the Ohio River Valley is a very different story. It's very hard to predict the Ohio River territory. Also, Indiana is extremely tornado prone. If you guys aren't careful, they're ranked 8th on the list of prone tornado states. And yes, Indiana's, however, despite it though, it's not part of Tornado Alley. But yes, Indiana does get some tornadoes. In fact, I think one of the worst tornadoes happened here in the state. It does get tornado stuff. But it's not as bad as some other states. Looking at you, Kansas, or Oklahoma, or Texas. The deadliest tornado that ever hit Indiana was the Tri-State Tornado in 1925. It was the most deadly tornado in the state. It hit through eastern Missouri, southern Illinois, and southern Indiana. And it killed 695 people and injured 2,000 more. And it was one of the most costly tornadoes in American history. It was widely accepted as an F5 tornado, and it crept through absolutely, it absolutely was terrible. It was just absolutely terrifying. So yeah, Indiana can get some really bad tornadoes. Do be warned. Just because it's not part of Tornado Alley does not mean tornadoes do not hit the state. Oh, and trust me, it does. There is that tip. So, here's Indiana's territory. One of the rivers you see here is the White River. It's one of the many rivers that flow into the state. Of course, Indiana's most famous river that flows through much of the state is the Wabash, and that goes through much of the state. The Wabash, and it's of course the stuff of folklore in the state. On the banks of the Wabash, who the state's song is all about the Wabash River. Of course, if you go to the southern part of it, it also has the Ohio River, which flows through much of southern Indiana. It goes through the border between Indiana and Kentucky, and it goes all the way to Indiana's border with Ohio. And that's where you can find some major cities, mainly Evansville, on the banks, Albany, Clarksville, Madison, and Lawrenceburg, on the banks of the Ohio River. Pretty interesting things going forward. So we're going to be heading to Bloomington, Indiana for a bit for our first stop. Of course, Bloomington is the big college, is one of the two big college towns in the state. The other one being West Lafayette and Lafayette. But Bloomington is the seventh most populous city in Indiana with 79,000 people. Of course, it's famously home to Indiana University Bloomington, flagship campus of IU. And it enrolls over 45,000 students, and it's one of the big college towns. It was established by settlers from Kentucky, Tennessee, the Carolinas, and Virginia, who were so impressed with the haven of blooms, they gave it it's a major tree city in the United States, which plants a lot of trees. It's also famous as the filming location of the Academy Award-winning movie Breaking Away, which features a reenactment of IU's famous Little 500 bicycle race, which is actually hosted by more than 25,000 fans. There's also lots of historical landmarks here in the National Historic Places and more. Of course, if you go east of Bloomington, you'll be able to find Brown County State Park, which is known as Little Smokies. It's absolutely beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful natural areas in the state. And of course, Bloomington is famous for Indiana University, which of course, Indiana University is world famous for basketball. And of course, that's technically the entire state loves basketball, but IU is most famous for its basketball program. But however, the most successful sport is not basketball, funnily enough. IU's most successful sport is unbelievably, it's soccer. It's men's soccer program. Yes, soccer. I mean, no joke, they won 8 national championships in soccer. So there's that. And we'll be flying to Monroe County Airport. And it's mainly a GA airport that serves Bloomington, Indiana. We're going to head to Bloomington County for our first stop. If you guys want to join on in, and if you're more than welcome to want to join on in, we're on the Southeast Asian server. All players, check, make sure you're all players. And just take something at least keep up with this Draco, which we're going to be going at around 150, 160 knots. So you guys are more than welcome to explore my home state. You don't have to. If you want to do it, you're more than welcome to. More than happy to. I mean, this has been a great birthday gift, especially for my home state. Yeah, there's so much to talk about my home states as a born and raised here. So, of course, one of the interesting questions I think some of you guys want to ask Hoosiers, of course, is one of the big ones is definitely the fact is does Indiana have natural beauty? I think some people ask. Indiana does actually have a national park, funnily enough, for its geography stuff. That's all the way up in northern Indiana, Indiana Dunes National Park, which we'll actually be able to visit there during one of our upcoming series about the U.S. national parks, and that's located in between South Bend and Gary is Indiana Dunes. Really cool national park. It's actually one of the most recent national parks, 61st Park, and it's actually got an extremely diverse flora and fauna. In fact, it has the eighth most plant species of any U.S. national park, over 1,400 species of plants. And combine that with its unique animal species too, with around 370 bird species and more. That means Indiana Dunes is one of the most biodiverse national parks in the country, which is extremely impressive. Which is unbelievable to think about, considering that it's not even that big of a national park. So, but yes, there are only a few handful of places that you can find more species. You can even find prickly pear cactus, the salamanders, tiger moths, mushroom, fungi species, tons of stuff. But the top one though is, of course, Smoky Mountains. It's the most biodiverse national park. Um, yeah, for example, in plant species, Indiana Dunes is above Mammoth Cave, which is in Kentucky, by the way. I really want to check out Mammoth Cave. And it's just below Sequoia Kings Canyon National Parks. But yes, it's more diverse than some other well-known national parks, such as Big Bend, Yellowstone, Shenandoah, and Zion, for plant biodiversity. Really crazy to think about it. And of course, it's also pretty diverse with animal species too, with 531 different animal species. Above those of Olympic, Acadia, Mammoth Cave, and even Yellowstone. It's just somewhat below Death Valley, though, the national parks. So we're going to go ahead and prepare for our first landing of the day here in Monroe County Airport here in Indiana. Hoosier State. So, yes, I'm wearing an IU t-shirt because, hey, you gotta rep your home state. But there's still a lot more information still up to cover. Of course, we're going to be heading to Indianapolis for the next leg. Indy. Yes, love this Draco. This thing's an absolute beast of a plane. Perfect for some of the high altitude stuff that I really am interested in wanting to do. Because of high altitude flying. So we'll stop here for about a minute or two if you guys want to catch up and want to join. So, this is going to and parking brake. There, guys. So we're here in beautiful air here in Bloomington, guys. Monroe County Airport. So we'll stop here for a minute if you guys want to join on in, or if you guys want to chat. You guys are more than welcome to. We're going to prepare for the second leg, guys. We're going to be heading to Indianapolis, Indiana. So we're going to head to Indy. We're going to go ahead and go up here. So Bloomington, Indiana is here. If you look to our left, or on our right, you can actually see Lake Monroe, one of the largest lakes in the state. It's some of the best natural beauty in the state in Brown County, which is a very popular um, area for a lot of nature people. Is Brown County State Park, which is one of the largest state parks in the country, in fact. And it's mainly used a lot for a lot of recreation activities like sightseeing, bird watching, mountain biking, fishing, hiking, and horse riding are very popular here. And of course, fishing is also available in some of the lakes, and more, as well as winter sports like cross-country skiing, sledding, and ice fishing. Pretty important. Here's Bloomington. Bloomington, Indiana, there's the sports facility. It's just a football stadium. Titan football somehow made the college football playoffs this year. Stuff that I thought would never happen for 500. No, I'm actually serious. They made the college football playoff this year. Herb Singeti literally brought Louisville, Indiana football relevancy. The first time since the 60s. I wish I was joking, but no, I'm actually serious. For once, the football program has actually been better than the basketball. Also, speaking about IU basketball, they did manage to get a brand new head coach. Again, Indians got a lot of coaching stuff. They haven't had consistent coaching in years. They bring in Darian DeVries as head coach. And they brought him in from Drake in West Virginia. So yeah, Drake DeVries is actually now Indiana's head coach. Definitely pretty interesting to see what he's going to do now. Let's hope he ended up doing the same thing as what Pat Kelsey did in Louisville. So Should be pretty interesting to see. But yes, this is Brown County Park to our right. One of the more beautiful natural areas here. It's definitely pretty scenic here, especially for Indiana standards. Again, it's not going to blow you away if you've ever been to the West, but it is pretty. Now, of course, our next stop. Yes, and that is Indianapolis, largest city capital of the state. Its official slogan is the Crossroads of America, thanks to its historic importance as a transportation hub. Its population is 887,642, making it the 16th most populous city in the country, as well as the third most populous city in the Midwest after Chicago and Columbus, and the fourth most populous state capital. Its metro area is 2.1 million residents. The city was actually founded in 1821 as a planned city and became the capital in 1825. It anchors the 28th largest metro economy in the country, with prominent industries like trade, transportation, utilities, education, health services, and more. It also has niche markets in both amateur sports and auto racing, as well as being home to 2 professional major sports teams. Indianapolis holds the NFL, and of course the Indiana Pacers of the NBA. It's also home to the WNBA's Indiana Fever, and it's where Caitlin Clark plays basketball professionally in Indianapolis. So yeah, we got Caitlin Clark. Go figure. But of course, Indianapolis is most well known for sports, for hosting the Indianapolis 500, the world's largest single-day sport event in the world, is here in Indiana. Also, a fun fact, in fact, Indianapolis has the largest collection of monuments dedicated to veterans and war casualties in the U.S. outside of Washington, D.C. How cool is that, guys? So if you'd like to learn more about your military history and stuff, Indianapolis is a great place to visit. And that's because you have the Indiana War Memorial here. Of course, the famous Monument Circle, which was 284 feet tall. And you have Indiana State House, so we'll definitely take some pictures of downtown Indianapolis. Of course, Indianapolis is also home to the largest children's museum in the world's largest children's museum, which is around 433,000 square feet with 120,000 artifacts, and it's a world leader for children's museum. And it draws over 1.2 million visitors a year. You also have a really nice Indianapolis Zoo, which is extremely nice. It's a great zoo. It even has a presidential site of the state's only U.S. president, Benjamin Harrison, only U.S. president that hails from the state of Indiana. He was the 23rd president of the country. So yes, he became the first president to represent the state of Indiana. Presidents. Also, in addition to this as well, of course, our first waypoint is going to take us to Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now, of course, if you all are aware about the Motor Speedway here in the States, it is absolutely huge. It can seat up to, get this, in just permanent seats alone, it seats 257,000 people. That's just the permanent seating. On race days, it can expand up to a colossal 400,000 people. You know, that's, to put this in context, 400,000 people. That's bigger than every other city in the state. Or you could basically fit in Fort Wayne and Evansville, and a large part of South Bend's population into the speedway, which is just absolutely insane. The Motor Speedway was actually opened all the way back in 1909. It's about 150 old. It's the third oldest permanent automobile track in the world, only behind the Brooklands, which was built in the United Kingdom, and the Milwaukee Mile. and it's the Speedway is the highest capacity sports venue in the world, and it's about 2.5 miles long. It also has an infield race course as well that was completed in 2000. And it's a National Historic Landmark, and it's the only such site to affiliate with automobile history. In addition to the world famous Indianapolis 500, it's also hosted the NASCAR's Brickyard 400 and Pennzoil 250, as well as the Formula One US Grand Prix and MotoGP for motorcycle racing. You can also find the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum in the Hall of Fame. And it even has its own golf course too. Yes, it has a golf course as well. So yes, lots of tradition here for automobile racing. So if you ever love automobile racing, you definitely need to make a pilgrimage to Indianapolis one. And of course, there's a lot of traditions here in Indianapolis. But of course, big tradition here in this is obviously to kiss the brick. Kissing the brick on the track. And it's actually a tradition here in as well to kiss the brick on the ground. Really cool stuff. If you ever do racing stuff, definitely want to check it out. Of course, there's other landmarks here in the city that's worth visiting. You obviously have Lucas Oil Stadium, the proud facility of the Indianapolis Colts. Really great facility. It's brick built with a nice retractable roof. It's also the home of the NFL Combine as well. And it's the headquarters of the NCAA as well in Indiana. Pretty cool stuff. Indianapolis, really great city, a really underrated city. Also, everything that Indianapolis is known for as well is, of course, some major films were filmed here, especially with the film industry. Like actors like James Baskets, who was featured in Song of the South, Steve McQueen, who's the most famous actor from the area. He was known as the King of Cool. He did a lot of really big movies back in the day from around this area. And of course, sports fans were dropped into other movies. Most notably the 1986 film Hoosiers. They also have 8 Men Out, which was a major baseball film. It was featured, some of them were featured in the Speedway. And more. As well as television programs here filmed. Really cool stuff. Indianapolis, really great city to check out. Tons of stuff to do. Highly recommend you guys want to check out Indianapolis. Also, as well, to our left, we actually have a really nice airport, Indianapolis International. Kilo India, November Delta, Indianapolis International Airport. It's actually a major FedEx hub, second largest FedEx hub in the country outside of well behind Memphis, Tennessee, Southwest. And apparently it's now going to start getting some international flights this year. In May, Aer Lingus is going to do international flights to Dublin, which is going to be really exciting though, because I've wanted to visit Dublin. Yes, they're now doing transatlantic flights. Yeah, can't wait for Aer Lingus to come back. Person translates. Pretty excited. So we'll fly around downtown Indianapolis for a bit. We'll fly. I'll probably tell you some of these landmark stuff too, and we'll take some pictures for the Discord. Which, by the way, if you guys want to check out my Discord, you guys are welcome to catch up with my streams, catch up with stuff. Here we go, guys. Here's the Discord. You guys are more than welcome to join. Indianapolis. Yes, I love taking pictures. My Discord also got some of my previous series included, including my original series back in 2021. I did a baseball series for MSFS 2020. It was my first ever series I've ever done. Still very proud of it too. Visiting all the Major League Baseball teams. I also did a DC3 round the world trip. And I'll be back doing more of my series stuff as well. Got lots of really cool stuff in my channel. It's not the most busiest, but I will post on occasions. Here we go, guys. We're in Indianapolis. For our first waypoint, we're going to be heading to the Speedway, of course. It is the biggest attraction here in the state by a country mile. Basically, what I'm trying to say for some of you guys who are unaware, if you want to put a comparison, the Indianapolis 500 is to Indianapolis what the Kentucky Derby is for Louisville, which is technically my home city. Both are major deals here in the States. Both bring lots of visitors from around the world, and lots of people come here. Here it is, guys, the Motor Speedway booth. Here's downtown Indianapolis. Yeah, it's really right in the center of the state. It really is right in the center of the state. And this series will go on for Fridays and Sundays for the time being, until I can get everything set up for some of my future content. And of course, here's downtown Indianapolis. Now, of course, I've been to some other race courses. I've been to one other one for major race course, and that was Daytona, back in Daytona Beach, Florida, which we will be visiting in this journey as well. Obviously, you can't do anything with racing. I haven't been to those. Here it is, guys, the massive speedway. Look at the size of this speedway. Here's the famous, here's the speedway tracks. There goes the straight line, and there's the brickyard down below to our left. Here's the world famous brickyard, where people kiss the bricks every time they win a race. It's a massive speedway, absolutely huge. This here is downtown Indianapolis. Indianapolis got some really cool landmarks. One of the most prominent ones in the state is the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. Um, it's actually made of course, made of Indianapolis, Indiana limestone, which is what the state's most famous for. Is Indiana's limestone. It's used for a lot of materials here across the country. In fact, there are tons of buildings that are made from the limestone here from our states. Most notably the Empire State Building, the Biltmore Estates, the freaking Pentagon, and the National Cathedral are all built from Indiana limestone. And it's mainly quarried in south central Indiana between Bloomington and Bedford. Some of the nicest limestone in the country. Built here. However, the issue is it kind of wears quickly due to acid rain. But that being said, of course, limestone. So here it is, guys. The Indianapolis skyline. There's Victory Field, home of the minor league Indianapolis Indians. It's the minor league baseball team, the minor league affiliate of the Pittsburgh Pirates. There's Lucas Oil Stadium, the proud home of Indianapolis Colts. The place that Manning built. Because, believe it or not, Peyton Manning played for most of his career here in Indianapolis. So, I know some of you guys are going to say, Peyton Manning, Broncos legend. No. Manning's a Colts legend. And proudly in Indianapolis. Yeah, here is the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. Crash into the local buildings here. Here's the mall. Similar to that of Washington, D.C., it's a mall. Lots of buildings and historic stuff here in the city. Lots of military stuff around this area, too. There's also Gainbridge Fieldhouse, home of the Pacers, Indiana's other major league team. Go ahead and... Yep. And west to... We're going to head west to Muncie, Indiana. We're now going to head northeast to Muncie, Indiana. I hope you guys are enjoying this stream. If you guys are enjoying this stream and want to learn more and want to continue to support the channel, smash that follow button, support the channel. We stream here 3 days a week on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. We'll be back with the States and Beans. On Sunday at 1400 Zulu time, we'll be visiting the U.S. state of Mississippi. We'll be going down from Natchez to Jackson to Clarksdale to Tupelo. Some very famous places here in Mississippi. Check it out. So very excited for it when that time comes. So let's go ahead and talk more about Indiana while we fly to Muncie. Of course, Indiana is most well known for some of its culture, mostly its arts, especially with literature. Especially during the late 19th century, became known as the golden age of Indiana literature, which lasted into the 1920s, with many famous authors such as Edward Eggleston, who voiced the Hoosier Schoolmaster, the first bestseller to originate in the States, and many more follow. Most well known being Maurice Thompson's Hoosier Mosaics. But however, the most famous of those books was from Lew Wallace, who was a Union general, and he did his historical adventure tale, Ben-Hur, in 1880. And that book, by the way, was the most influential Christian book of the 19th century. It later became the best-selling American novel, surpassing that of Uncle Tom's Cabin in sales. And of course, it was even famously adapted as a film in 1959 when MGM adapted this film, and it became one of the greatest films ever. And it won a record 11 Academy Awards in 1960. And afterwards, it increased the sales of the book, and it surpassed by Gone with the Wind. It was even blessed by Pope Leo XIII. It's become a popular cultural icon as well from Ben-Hur, and that is from an Indiana author. There are also other books too, like Booth Tarkington's book, Gentleman from Indiana, Meredith Nicholson's The Hoosiers, Thompson's Alice of Old Vincennes. We also have the famous Indiana poet James Whitcomb Riley, the most popular poet of his age, and he did hundreds of poems with themes from Indiana, including Little Orphan Annie, which has been very well known poem, as well as authors and painters too. And of course, popular musicians have reached here, including Paul Dresser, which he did the most famous song On the Banks of the Wabash Far Away, state's official song. But yes, Indiana was known for its arts too, which is something a lot of people don't know. And then of course, sports are a big deal here in the States. Of course, you all know Indiana being a sport for auto racing. Makes complete sense with the Indianapolis 500, which is held every year in every May. And it's one of the greatest spectacle racing, more than 250,000 people every year visiting here. It's also hosted the largest prestigious drag race, NHRA Mac Tools U.S. Nationals, at Lucas Oil Raceway in Indianapolis. And it's also home to not just auto racing, but you wouldn't believe this, but Indiana also hosts a major hydroplane racing. It's a powerboat racing. What? Powerboating? Yes, that's a thing here in the States. It's held in Madison, Indiana, on the banks of the Ohio River. It's hosted in Madison, Indiana. The Madison Regatta, one of the only ones here in the state. Which is hard to believe, but yes, powerboat racing is actually a deal here. Despite being completely landlocked, it's hosted racing. In fact, it even inspired a Hollywood film here too. But it's held every year in the States. In addition to this, it's also hosted 2 professional sports teams. Indianapolis Colts for the NFL and the Indiana Pacers of the NBA. Also, as of 2013, Indiana's produced more NBA players per capita than any U.S. state, especially in Muncie. And of course, this state has a rich basketball heritage, especially for high schools. Of course, outside of that, there's also minor league clubs in the minors all across the state, from Evansville to Fort Wayne, Gary, even in Indianapolis itself. But of course, Indiana is also known for college athletics. Has several collegiate teams. Most notably, the most notable teams are Ball State University in Muncie. Then you have the Indiana University Hoosiers, Purdue Boilermakers out of Purdue University in West Lafayette, and Notre Dame University, the University of Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish, are the most prominent collegiate programs. Indiana Hoosiers have won 5 national championships in college men's basketball and 22 conference championships. Purdue Boilermakers actually have won more Big Ten championships, but they still yet to win a national championship in college basketball. Just yet. They came very close last year. I don't know if they can do it this year, but hey, anything can happen. Of course, even though Indiana's been struggling dominating at basketball, Indiana's also home to one of the most prestigious collegiate football programs in history. Notre Dame Fighting Irish win 11 national championships, as well as multiple bowl games. Notre Dame football is an institution for college football. Yes, a little private university in South Bend, Indiana, has actually been extremely successful in football. But no, it's a very old program with a very rich history. Oh yeah, one more thing about sports in Indiana. I know I said basketball is a big deal in the state, but it's mainly basketball, and it extends not only to college basketball, it's in high school too. There's this thing called Hoosier Hysteria, and it's basically a state of assignment basketball in Indiana, especially high school basketball. And most famously was in 1954 when Milan beat Muncie Central to win the state title. And that basically became the basis of the Hoosiers movie. And basically, Indiana's passion for basketball was actually written by its own inventor, James Naismith, in 1925. And even though while it was invented in Massachusetts, he stated that basketball really has origin of Indiana. The state of Indiana absolutely loves basketball. There is no question basketball's king in this state. A lot of Hoosiers play in the NBA from the Hoosiers. And there's a lot of traditions here that play basketball. In fact, some of the highest high school gymnasiums in the country are actually here in the state. Yes, a lot of the high school basketball gymnasiums are here in the state. 9 of the 10 largest high school gyms in the country are all in the state. The top 20 are here in Indiana. Some of these venues have over 6,000 people. And the largest in Newcastle seats 9,325 people. Yes, you've heard this right. 9,325 people. That's bigger than many college basketball arenas in the country. That's bigger than many of the college basketball state arenas in the country. And yes, it's high school basketball, which is crazy. But yes, basketball is king in this more so than any other sport. If Texas can have football, Indiana's certainly going to be basketball. In fact, not only just Indiana University basketball and Purdue, Indiana State even had success in basketball. When Larry Bird led them to the Final Four, and they were runner-ups to Magic Johnson's Spartans. Yes, Indiana State, Sycamore. Yeah. What I'm trying to say is that basketball is absolutely king in this state. There's no question about it. So our next area we're going to be visiting here today is going to be Muncie. Is Muncie, Indiana, be our next destination? Population 65,000 people. It is it was founded in 1827. It's actually built as one of those. It developed as a center for manufacturing industrial center, especially after the Indiana gas boom of the 80s, and is the home of Ball State University. However, Muncie is also actually better known with the Middletown Studies, which was conducted with residents of Muncie, Indiana, by sociologists um, Robert Scott Lind and Helen Merrill Lind, and they were detailed in their studies, and it was one of the most studied U.S. cities of its size. Basically, those studies were all about um, the typical American small city, um, and find the most Central American cities. They decide were actually found here in Muncie. They did a lot of stuff, studies all across Muncie, Indiana, from youth, home and family, vocational stuff as well. Yes, Muncie was most famous for being the place of that studies. Which is pretty funny considering that Muncie is a very much American city. And as a result, Muncie is also known as the Magic City. It is pretty funny. It was also used in World War II. A lot of pilots, especially at its airports, as well as continued growth. It used to be much more industrialized, mainly with railway transportation hubs for railway and stuff. Honestly, definitely a pretty cool little city. Historically was known for its manufacture back in the prime of its industry. It did glass manufacturing, iron steel mills, and automobiles. Pretty, pretty interesting stuff. Of course, the home of Ball State. Well, definitely some pretty cool stuff. And our airport is Delaware County Regional, which will be our second stop of the day. Johnson Field was what they call it. It used to do some airline flights, however, that ended in the 1990s. It's mainly right now a GA facility. The Ball State, known as the Cardinals, it was founded in 1918 by the Ball brothers. Founded their own corporation, which Ball's known for their glass jars, lids, and it became its own school. They're known as their athletics are known as the Ball State Cardinals. They're well known for other sports, but most notably basketball. Be the powerhouse of the MAC conference. And some of his most famous alumni include former UPS president Kent Nelson. The creator of Garfield himself, of the Garfield comic strip, is actually from Ball State alumni, Jim Davis. Of course, probably his most famous guy is David Letterman. You guys all know him from The Late Show with David Letterman. Yeah, he was actually alumni of Ball State. Actor Doug Jones. In 1982, he did with a lot of the movies with Guillermo del Toro, mainly with Hellboy. The Hellboy movies, as well as The Shape of Water and stuff. Did a lot of stuff too. But yes, some major people from Ball State. We're going to be getting closer to Fort Wayne. Here it is, guys. Muncie. Typical small American city. Little Muncie. We're going to go ahead and make the landing here. Here's Ball State. Yeah, I really do enjoy flying over my home state. It's definitely a lot of fun, guys. I love our home state. I like my home. There you go, guys. Welcome to Muncie. So that will be our second of 3 stops today. We're in beautiful Muncie. We've got one last leg left to cover, which is to South Bend. Let's go ahead and prepare for the last leg up to um, South Bend. Cool situation. How much? Gonna Guys, we're gonna head to Fort Wayne. We're gonna head to Fort Wayne. We're gonna head to Fort Wayne. This will be 50. The leg will be 52. First part of the leg will be 52 nautical miles. We'll be heading to Fort Wayne, Indiana. We're gonna come to 2000. And we'll discuss some of the other stuff going on. So about Indiana, let's talk about its economy. So Indiana's economy is quite diverse, actually. It has a total civilian workforce of 3.4 million people, the 15th largest in the U.S. It has an unemployment of 3.4%, which is lower than national average. Total gross state product was $347 billion in 2016, and a lot of it is manufacturing, which nearly 17% of the non-farm workforce is manufacturing. The highest of any U.S. state. Its 5 leading exports were motor vehicles and auto parts, pharmaceutical products, industrial machinery, optical and medical equipment, and electric machinery. Despite its manufacturing reliance, it's actually less affected by declines in traditional Rust Belt manufacture than many neighbors, which is explained to be certain factors like which a lot of it was manufacturing, were often located with hard trade skills already exist. And India's labor force is primarily medium or small sized cities. So as a result, they contain higher skilled workforce at lower than average wages. And India is also the second most manufactured state. So India is also home to 7 Fortune 500 companies built here in the States, most notably including Columbus, Indiana-based Cummins, Indianapolis-based Eli Lilly and Company, Southern Property Group, also represents their own industries. Northwest Indiana has been the largest steel producing area in the United States since 1975. It incorporates for about over a quarter of American-made steel in 2016. It's home to the international headquarters of the Eli Lilly pharmaceutical company, the largest corporation in the state. And the state ranks 5th among all U.S. states in total sales of pharmaceutical products. Also is also part of the corn and grain belt. So as a result, corn and soybeans are major cash crops in the state. As well as urban centers allowed for dairy, egg production, and horticulture to occur. Other crops include melons, tomatoes, grapes, mint, popcorn, and tobacco are also grown here in the state. And it's one of the best places in the country to do business for businesses in the state. So yes, Indiana is actually a very diverse state. It also has a bit of history with mining. Mainly, of course, it's limestone, which is famous in the United States for its limestone with many public buildings. Mainly at the Pentagon. Also, it also has a small, medium operated petroleum field. Yes, it does have some petroleum stuff too, just not very much. It's also mainly used with a lot of biofuel, like ethanol and biodiesel. Yes, Indiana's economy is quite diverse in that field. And then, of course, for transportation, of course, Indianapolis Airport is the big airport in the state. By far the largest airport in the state, dwarfing all the others, like Evansville, Fort Wayne, South Bend. I know there's a lot of proposals to turn Gary to become the 3rd major airport in Chicago, Gary, Indiana, but that hasn't come to fruition just yet. Of course, no one's operated out of Terre Haute since 1954. And of course, for many residents in southern Indiana, some of them go to Louisville International Airport, as well as Cincinnati, northern Kentucky for some of those who are closer to southern Indiana, particularly Louisville and Cincinnati. Actually, some of them just go to Louisville or Cincinnati. It is closer. And if you live in northwest Indiana, of course, go to the airports in Chicago. Midway and O'Hare can do a lot of flying. In terms of roads, Obviously, with this being the crossing of America, lots of U.S. interstate highways make their roads here. Most notably I-64, I-65, I-265, I-465, I-70, I-74, I-90, and more, and they always intersect in and around Indianapolis, which, along with its railroad hub and canals, became the state's motto, the Crossroads of America. So yes, there are lots of highways in this state. In fact, there are also many U.S. routes and state highways, so Indiana is very much a place with lots of roads. They all bisect through the state of Indiana, so you have a good chance if you drive through the highway, you're going to get through Indianapolis. And there's a lot of county roads too. And of course, finally for transportation there's also a lot of railroad miles. In fact, 4,200 railroad route miles are in the state, particularly those of Class 1 railroads, like freight railroads, like CSX and stuff, and more. And surprisingly, Indiana also ships a lot of cargo through water, mainly because half of its border is literally waterborne. You have the Great Lakes in northwest Indiana and the Ohio River. So that is Indiana's transportation. In addition to this as well, in terms of other news as well, the NBA is going on. My hometown Pacers are currently on a nice 3-win streak, so if they will pretty much secure the 4th seed. They're definitely going to make the playoffs this year in the NBA. The Pacers are doing pretty well this year. Though the Eastern Conference have already been clinched by the Cavs and Celtics. In the West, Oklahoma State has been the team in the West. Our next city we'll be visiting here pretty shortly is Fort Wayne, Indiana. Now, Fort Wayne is actually Indiana's second most populous city after Indianapolis, with a population of 260,000 people. It's the cultural and economic center of northeast Indiana, and it was named after Fort Wayne, which was built in 1794 by the U.S. Army under the direction of General Anthony Wayne, which is the namesake of Fort Wayne itself. And the European American settlement developed at the confluence of the St. Joseph, St. Mary's, and Maumee rivers. The original is Fort Miami. The modern city was platted down in 1823 after its revitalization of the War of 1812, and it went through growth with the Wabash and Canal and the railroad. It really grew Fort Wayne to be a pretty important city. It was once a manufactured town, the Rust Belt. However, nowadays it's been more with services, distribution, and communication. It's a center for the U.S. defense industry, which employs 1 to 2% of its population, and it was an All-American City recipient in 1983, 1998, 2009, and 2021. Back in the old days, it was a major manufacturing city, with many companies having their presence here, include the Dana Holding Corporation, General Electric, International Harvester, Magavox, and Tuckheim, among others, produced a lot of different stuff, from refrigerators to washing machines, phonographs, packing products, televisions, garbage disposals, and more. Especially magnet wire was also a big deal. And in fact, nearly 90% of North America's magnet wire comes out of Fort Wayne. However, nowadays it's more with services. There's also some really cool attractions in Fort Wayne. One of the really cool ones is one of the best zoos in the country, the Fort Wayne Zoo, which contains over 1,000 animals, 200 species, draws over 500,000 visitors. It has its own art museum, a lot of American art. We also have lots of festivals and events, including German Fest, Greek Festival, Barbecue Rib Fest. Of course, though, the largest event is the Johnny Appleseed Festival, which of course is named after the local folk hero Johnny Appleseed. And he grew a lot of apple trees throughout much of the U.S. states of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and Ontario. However, Pico is especially prominent in Indiana and Ohio, or especially prominent in the states. But this festival here attracts about 300,000 people a year, and it's held at Johnny Appleseed Park, where it's actually believed where he was actually buried. Of course, we don't know if that's actually the truth, but he's actually buried here too. And you can find lots of apple tree cuisine, crafts, and more for here at the festival. There's also Three Rivers Festival, which celebrates Fort Wayne's history, attracts 400,000 visitors, and more. So, pretty cool stuff here. And surprisingly, this city's also got a rich sports history too, including the first lighted baseball games were recorded in 1883. And most notably, Fort Wayne is the birthplace of the National Basketball Association. Yes, it came out of Fort Wayne, Indiana. As Piston coach Carl Bennett urged the BA and the NBL right here in Fort Wayne. And yes, before you ask, the Detroit Pistons used to come out of Fort Wayne. Not originally from Detroit, but Fort Wayne, Indiana. Yes, some people don't. So yeah, Fort Wayne, definitely a really cool city as well. Like I said, it's a really great little city to visit. It'll be a great day trip. And Fort Wayne does also have some photogrammetry here too. Fort Wayne's one of the 2 cities in Indiana that really have photogrammetry. It's actually 3 cities: Fort Wayne, South Bend, and Indianapolis or the Indiana places that actually have photogrammetry. So you will get to see some photogrammetry here at Fort Wayne. Fort Wayne, and once we get to Fort Wayne, we'll turn left and we'll head to South Bend, Indiana. To our left is Fort Wayne International. This is Fort Wayne International Airport. It used to be known as Bear Field, actually. It was actually used quite a bit during World War II. It was a big part of some of the training regiments here in World War II. But now it's turned more into a commercial airport, mainly with cargo. And it was actually originally known as Bear Field. It was mainly used a lot for World War II. It was used for the Quartermaster Corps, for the U.S. Army, fly a lot of 39 Air Cobras, P-40 Warhawks, and were actually flown out of this airport. Yeah, it was a pretty major airport for World War II. Love the Draco, though. Amazing. Love this one. We'll be making our way north. So here's Fort Wayne, Indiana. Take some good shots here. We'll make our way to South Bend. Of course, to our north, by the way, is Smith Field. This is the main GA airport of Fort Wayne. It used to be the original Bear Municipal Airport, and it was named after, of course, for a very famous pilot. And this airport was famous for a lot of famous pilots: Douglas Corrigan, Jimmy Doolittle, Charles Lindbergh, Eddie Rickenbacker, George Wilkins, Wiley Post, Howard Hughes. A lot of famous people flew out of the little old Smith Field. So, a lot of famous people, and it's been around since 1918. Been around for decades. Very old airport. Have to head there's Fort Wayne. Like I said, not a massive city, but it is pretty notable here in this west. So thank you guys so much for coming along here today. I mean, There's still 12 people. There's still a lot of people here watching. Really appreciate you guys so much for coming here. Always. Like I said, that friendly guy, thank you so much for the. That was really great. We're going to continue on this way for another 61 nautical miles. Draco, really, I love the Draco. Can't wait to take this on some bush trips. It's going to be a lot of fun flying this bad boy across bush trips. So, cover some of the final slides here for the U.S. state of Indiana, and there are some interesting fun facts here about the U.S. state of Indiana. Of course, its limestone is very famous. It has some of the richest deposits of limestone on Earth. And it's featured so many buildings, including the Empire State Building in New York, the Rockefeller Center, Pentagon, U.S. Treasury, a dozen other government buildings in D.C., as well as 14 state capitol buildings were built from beautiful Indiana limestone. Indiana's limestone, absolutely a major symbol of art. It's mainly been for it in South Central India. But yeah, a lot of places around the world use Indiana limestone. So nowadays it's not used as much anymore, but Indiana limestone is very, very famous. Amazing limestone. Outside of that, though, you also have people from Indiana known as Hoosiers. Sometimes known as Indianans, but it's Hoosiers. It's something unique. Some of the most famous movies filmed here include Hoosiers, starring Gene Hackman, who unfortunately passed away at 95 earlier this year. Rudy, featuring Sean Astin, talked about Notre Dame football, and A League of Their Own, featuring Tom Hanks, Gina Davis, and yes, Madonna herself, are filmed here in the state. Of course, South Bend was once the largest producer of horse-drawn wagons, the Studebaker Company, which later developed into a multi-million-dollar automobile manufacturer. That's Studebaker. It was a major part of Studebaker. They produced a lot of cars back in the day, too. Studebaker produced a lot of vehicles, and they went from 1852 to 1968. They produced some really interesting cars. But they don't do so anymore. And finally, of course, at one point, Peru, Indiana was known as the circus capital of America. Oh, yes, because of all the circuses that come here. Used to be. Not anymore. Of course, Indiana's home to some famous people, and oh boy, there are a lot of them here in the state. Some figures you never even realized they were from Hoosiers. Of course, legendary basketball player Larry Bird out of French Lick played for the Boston Celtics. He was the face of the Boston Celtics for much of the 80s and 90s. Larry legend. How about one of the most famous actors of the 50s, James Dean, from Marion, Indiana. Yes, James Dean, who was a major actor back in the day. Unfortunately, he passed away way too young. He only lived for 24 years. His career only lasted for 5 years. But James Dean's legacy still lives on today. He only appeared in 3 major films: Rebel Without a Cause, Beast of Eden, and Giant. And all 3 have been preserved for the National Film Registry. He died of a car accident at 24 years old. Yeah, died way too young. Of course, one of the first socialist leaders in America, Eugene V. Debs of Terre Haute. Of course, a very famous astronaut, Virgil Grissom from Mitchell, Indiana. I got to visit that too. Author Alfred Bertrand Guthrie from Bedford. How about actor and band leader Phil Harris, very well-known actor. Phil Harris, born of Linton, Indiana. He was a prior radio station comedy with the Jack Benny program. Then the Phil Harris Alice Faye show with his wife, Alice Faye for 8 years. He also was a voice actor, mainly voicing Baloo in the original Jungle Book, Alice O'Malley in Aristocats, and Little John in Robin Hood. He lived on to 1995. He lived all the way lived to be 91 years old. James F. Hoffa, labor leader from Brazil. James Hoffa comes from here. Of course, Michael Jackson, the king of pop himself, is actually from our home state. Yes, Michael Jackson, king of pop. One of the most significant figures is from our home state. His world music broke racial barriers and global figure. And was the 8th children of the Jackson family, and he was a member of the Jackson 5. And of course, you all know about Michael Jackson's legendary music. Off the Wall, Thriller, Bad, and more. He made a lot but he also had a lot of controversies too. But yeah, Michael Jackson is a music legend. Boom. Of course, David Letterman, famous TV host and comedian. Then, of course, Seymour, Indiana's very own John Mellencamp. He was big in the 80s from Seymour. The famous comedian Red Skelton from Vincennes. And finally, the last major person on this list, one of the 2 Wright brothers, Wilbert Wright, is actually from Indiana. He is from Millville. And that basically covers a lot of Indiana figures. Yes, the state itself. I know Indiana gets overlooked as a U.S. state, but yes, we have some very famous people. It may not have the many U.S. presidents of other states like Virginia. It may not have Hollywood stars like California. But yes, we do have our own talent. And our own people. But there's a lot more other Hoosiers I haven't even covered yet. Some of the other Hoosiers we haven't covered yet. Of course, George Rogers Clark. He lived in Clarksville. Some of the people who are from here, who have born or lived here, include George Rogers Clark, who lived in Clarksville. It's the namesake. You have Sammy L. Davis, honorary recipient from the Vietnam War. Atlantic Fleet Commander in World War II, Jonas Ingram. He was from Jeffersonville. He was a Medal Honor recipient and an Atlantic Fleet Commander for World War II. The first woman to actually have enlisted in the Marine Corps, Ova Mae Johnson, from Kokomo. That's just the military stuff we've yet to cover. Political leaders, of course, Benjamin Harrison, the only president to actually represent the state of Indiana, 23rd president, as well as the 9th president of the United States, William Henry Harrison, lived in Indiana. Abraham Lincoln actually lived in Indiana for much of his childhood. He actually lived in Indiana. It was Abraham Lincoln who actually lived in Indiana for much of his life. He was born. He was actually lived in Indiana for several years. You obviously have, you also have Mike Pence, who was the 48th Vice President of the United States, who was the former governor of Indiana from Columbus. And also, as well, of course, for some other Native American, and of course for some other entertainment and leaders and actors, there's actually a lot of them here. We know James Dean, of course, but you also have Anne Baxter, she actually was a very successful actress. She was actually from Michigan City, and she was the granddaughter of Frank Lloyd Wright. And she starred in a lot of movies and stuff, too. She was very famous. Carol Lombard. Of course, Steve McQueen himself is one of the most famous actors of this. He did a lot of movies, most notably The Great Escape, Magnificent Seven, and Bullet. Born from Beech Grove. But yes, very famous actors in film and theater. Very famous people. You also have Red Skelton, very famous comedian. He has his own television program too. Very famous guy. In terms of musicians, I know I mentioned Michael Jackson, rightfully so, but there's some other ones in Mellencamp. You also have Axl Rose, the vocalist of Guns N' Roses. He is also born from our home state. Janet Jackson, who is infamously part of the wardrobe malfunction scandal. You have the lead guitarist for Motley Crue, Mick Mars, from Motley Crue, from the home state. You have Adam Lambert, actually, who is the runner-up of American Idol, Adam Lambert, who's actually now currently the singer of Queen. Born from Indianapolis, he's actually now Queen's singer. Yes, he's also from Indiana. Got lots of famous people. Of course, and who could forget about David Lee Roth from Van Halen, Bloomington, who's the famous lead singer. But yes, some very famous people, lots of television actors. D. Bradley Baker from Bloomington, very famous voice actor. But yeah, lots of people. In sports athletes, you have Gil Hodges, Scott, for baseball players like Gil Hodges, Tommy John, Scott Rowland, Craig Counsell, Don Mattingly, Don Larson. Lots of famous people from Indiana. Baseball, of course, Indiana's got famous for basketball. Larry Bird, obviously, but tons of basketball players in the States. Skylar Diggins, Zach Randolph, Hall of Famer Oscar Robertson, born in the United States, Indiana. Tons of basketball players to pick from. There's almost too many to pick from the Hoosier State. You need to pick. Also, tons of coaches too, including three of the greatest coaches ever: Greg Popovich, legendary NBA coach of the Spurs; John Wooden, considered to be the greatest college basketball coach of all time, John Wooden. Then you also have South Carolina Buford's head coach, Sharon Veras, as well. Tons of famous coaches. There's some famous football players, most notably Bob Greasy and Rod Woodson, most notable football players. And also you have Hall of Fame coach Hank Stram. But yes, lots of famous people who have been around the state of Indiana. What I'm trying to say is, yeah, there's many famous people. I'll stop talking about that for a little bit. What I'm trying to say is, yeah, my home state's got lots to represent this. So our final slides we'll be covering today is South Bend, Indiana will be our last slides to cover here for today's stream. Like I said, thank you guys for being here as well. So we're in South Bend, which is the fourth largest city in the state, 103,000 people. It borders, it's directly below the border of Michigan. The metro area is 324,000 people. It was first settled in the 1960s by fur traders. The city in 1865. South Bend, Indiana really grew mainly with industry, mainly that with the Studebaker Corporation and the Oliver Chill Plow Company. And it was heavily affected during the industrial decline of the 1960s. However, in recent years, they have been more to revitalize the city under the mayorship of Pete Buttigieg. Now, its largest industries are healthcare and education. Of course, a lot of people go to South Bend for the University of Notre Dame, which, of course, is known as home of the Notre Dame Irish, and the city is served by South Bend International Airport. So, of course, in terms of South Bend, it was actually a pretty major place during World War II, which was mainly by the Studebaker plant, but also the Binix factory. Well, it was actually a pretty major deal with World War II. A lot of companies made their home. The Binix Corporation actually was a big part of the company, and they produced a lot of aerodynamic hydraulics and power systems. It was actually a big thing for technology back in the day. Nowadays, it's more for arts and culture, and of course, has a lot of holidays, especially with Dingus Day, which is celebrated, which is a Polish tradition that's celebrated the Monday after Easter. And also Fat Tuesday celebrated, which is its own Mardi Gras festival, and more. It's got a rich Catholic tradition, which inspires its own stuff. It's got a Studebaker National Museum. It's got some of the large collection of Studebakers. Of course, if you gotta talk about the biggest part of culture here in the States, it's gotta be Notre Dame University, University of Notre Dame. And Notre Dame University is the big deal here in this city, especially with its football program. And that's why it's called, historically been known as the state's football team. The Irish football is a massive tradition. They play at Notre Dame Stadium. They've been around since 1930. It's one of the great facilities in college football. It's over 70,000 people. And it's home to some very famous moments in Notre Dame history. It's also got some concerts. Ice hockey is played here as well. And more. And Notre Dame football is an institution here in the state. There's so many famous players and coaches over the years. Our final stop for today is going to be South Bend International Airport. Located in South Bend, just 3 miles northwest of downtown. It's the state's second busiest airport after Indianapolis. In the early days, it was Cadet Field, and it was actually this airport came around in 1929 to provide air service close to the city. And yes, it's found by the Binix Corporation. It later did a lot more commercial airlines, and it became South Bend International in 2014. It currently does service flights to destinations. Mainly, low-cost airlines take these flights down to to Florida. Some destinations include Knoxville, Las Vegas, Orlando, Phoenix, St. Petersburg, Charlotte, Dallas, Orlando, Washington, Atlanta, Detroit, Minneapolis, Chicago, and DC are some of the destinations serving South Bend International. That covers the last slides with Indiana. Okay? But yeah, South Bend was actually where the Binix Aviation Corporation was founded for aviation history. It was formerly founded in South Bend. The Binix used to do a lot of brakes for cars and trucks. However, where it really grew was for aviation. A lot of avionics and stuff were produced by Bendix. It also did a lot of a lot of military history. After all, Biggs founded a lot of hydraulic systems like the pressure carburetor, which was a big deal for a lot of aircraft during this time. They even sponsored the Bendix Trophy, which is transcontinental U.S. point race to encourage aircraft development. During World War II, made a lot of radar equipment, as well as making aviation masks for diving and hyperbaric applications. And of course, it even invented a mini computer as well during this time, which was basically the size of two tall filing cabinets. Yes, they actually invented a small computer. You can get it for $50,000. Yeah, that's computers back in the day. They don't make them like they do nowadays. Now computers can be this size. And also the mail office. Yeah, pretty cool stuff. Here we are, guys. South Bend. South Bend, Indiana, guys. We're about to reach our final stop. At a final spot. Thank you guys so much for coming here. We're about to make our final landing soon. Yep, South Bend. West, and this is the University of Notre Dame. So you can see a couple things from the campus, of course. You have the basketball center, Pearsall North Dome. There's the base, and of course the famous football facility. And of course in the background you can see Touchdown Jesus. Yep, here's the campus of Notre Dame. Here is Touchdown Jesus. Okay. There it is, guys. And finally, our airport will land South Bend International. Kilo S Sierra Bravo November. Land at 27 left and we'll park. And we'll wrap up today's stream. Yep, did some aerobatics. Here we go, guys. Landing for the day. Welcome to South Bend. And we're done. And voila. And that's it, everyone. Welcome to South Bend. And that's it, guys. That's our final stop of the day. So, guys, I hope you all had a great stream today. Hope you all enjoy your time here. Thank you guys so much for the stream. And again, definitely, guys, thank you for your rate of 95. I really am grateful. So we'll see you all soon. We'll be rating our good friend O Can Do. We're going to rate his channel today. So, guys, we'll be back on Sunday, 1400 Zulu. We'll be in Mississippi. We'll be checking out one of the hubs of the Deep South. So take care, guys, and have a fantastic rest of your day and the start of your all's weekend. Goodbye, everyone.